Hello and welcome to this lecture on the do's and don'ts of IT alignment. When your CEO comes to you, and I'm going to assume that you're the CIO for the purpose of this discussion, so when your CEO comes to you and he says, I would like to get more value out of my IT investment, if you don't properly understand what he's asking for, you may be somewhat offended. You may be thinking, he doesn't understand that there's value in the fact that I've got this great IT infrastructure working right. There's value in the fact that the information that we have on our clients and our projects is secure, that there's value in the fact that everybody in the company has access to the internet, and we have a mobility plan and they can use whatever device they want and take it wherever in the world they want and still connect up to the company systems. If that's the way you're responding when the CEO says, I want to get more value out of my IT investment, then you're completely misunderstanding what he's saying. It's not that he doesn't believe that there's value in all of that. He obviously does, or she obviously does. The question being asked has to do with the proper definition of the word value. When your CEO uses the word value, what does she mean, or what does he mean? The word value is as he or she learned in business school and college. Value is defined as increasing profits of the company. Sometimes the way we approach increasing profits of the company is to focus on increasing the size of the customer base. Sometimes it's improving the brand, again, which is going to just feed back to increasing the profits of the company. But ultimately it comes down to when he says, I want to get more value out of my IT investment, what he's saying is, I want you to use the IT budget that I'm giving you to create more of an impact on the profits of the company. And I want that to be conscious, purposeful, systematic in the way that we do that. So once you understand the question that he's asking and the particular perspective that he's coming from when he asks that question, that completely changes how a CIO who didn't properly understand the question now responds to that. So we're going to ask the question today, how do we do that? First of all, let me provide some contrasts. There's a fundamental and significant difference in the job description, the job responsibilities of a very good IT director and a very good CIO. Those are very different jobs. We've come across in the decade or so that we've been helping CIOs be better at what they do, we oftentimes see a situation where the CIO is nothing more than just a glorified IT director with a title change. In the larger corporations, in the more aggressive, successful businesses, there's a very different job description between the CIO and the multiple IT directors that will work for him or her. A good IT director is focused on delivering IT services that are reliable, secure, and affordable. A good CIO is focused on using IT resources to create strategic business value. Again, value in terms of profits. So in other words, a good CIO is focused on how he's going to use at least the new development portion of his IT budget to significantly increase the profits of the corporation. So let's contrast for a moment non-competitive CIO, which we will call the cost center CIO, with a competitive CIO, which we will call a profit center CIO. The cost center CIO, and we'll just do an apples to apples comparison here. So let's say that he has an IT budget of $100 million a year, and that out of that $100 million a year, he creates $10 million a year in new profits to the company. Or maybe he produces $20 million a year worth of increases in the customer base. And he justifies this performance with the statement something like, it's hard to focus on expanding the railroad if you can't make the trains run on time. So he's focused on making the trains run on time, not on expanding the railroad. To contrast this, a competitive CIO or a profit center CIO is taking that same $100 million budget, still providing the same IT infrastructure services as the cost center CIO, only somehow he's managing to create $200 million a year in new profits and new customers, as opposed to the 10 or 20 of the cost center CIO. So, and by the way, he can prove that increase in profits with legitimate, believable business metrics. So let's look at this from the CFO's point of view. From the CFO's point of view, in the first case, the CFO is putting $100 million a year into IT, and in terms of increase to the bottom line, he's getting 10 or 20 million back out. That means this is a cost center, because it's costing the company money from the CFO's point of view. Whereas the profit center CIO is getting the same 100 million put in per year, but it's creating an additional 200 million in profits. Now, those of you that aren't used to working with numbers like this or ratios like this, let me assure you this is quite attainable. CIOs who are good at IT alignment and IT governance consistently will produce this sort of increase in corporate profits based on an IT budget of much smaller than the addition to the bottom line that they're creating for the company. Well, you can imagine for a profit center CIO, when he's going to the CFO and asking for more money for a new initiative coming out of IT, that's a lot easier for the CFO to find that money than a cost center CIO asking for the same thing. As a matter of fact, we've learned there's an easy way to tell when you're a cost center CIO simply by looking at the org chart. If the CIO reports to the CFO, dead giveaway, he's operating as a cost center CIO. And the reason that he's been assigned to the CFO is sometime in the past he probably reported directly to the CEO. The CEO kept saying things like, I want to get more value out of my IT investment, and the CIO kept completely misunderstanding the question, failed to respond with proactive measures to create more profits, significantly more profits for the company from the IT budget that he was given, and eventually the CEO gave up and said, well, look, if I'm not going to get increased value, i.e. increased profits out of the CIO, then at least I can make sure that the costs of my IT investment are constrained, and the best way to do that is put him under the CFO. The CFO will make sure that we don't spend any money on IT that we don't absolutely have to spend. Now, that story has played out over and over and over and over in company after company that we've looked at. And what we help CIOs do is get out of that rut. We first of all teach them the processes they need so that they can use their IT budget to make significant and measured contributions to the profits of the company. To do that with strategic planning processes, the first of those is IT alignment. And a lot of times we see the reporting structure of our clients change within 6 months of the time they came to us. If they used to report to the CFO, typically about at the 6-month point, it's almost like clockwork. We see the CIO comes to us one day, we get a call or something, and says, hey, guess what? I have a new reporting structure. I no longer report to the CFO, I now report directly to the CEO. Well, that's because the CEO has seen the CIO doing the kinds of things that he's needed that CIO to do all along. i.e. being very systematic and purposeful and effective about increasing the profits of the corporation. And once the CEO sees that coming out of the CIO, then the CEO wants that CIO reporting directly to him, because he becomes a major and valuable part of that CEO's leadership team for the corporation. And he doesn't want that CIO stifled anymore by a CFO who's focused primarily on just keeping IT costs down. Okay, so we see that a competitive CIO knows that reliable, secure, and affordable IT services are critically important to the company. Everybody gets that. But that CIO delegates those challenges to competent IT directors so that that CIO can focus on strategic value creation. So one of the things that we're saying here is that a wise CIO is going to conceptually look at his or her IT department as performing two functions. One is the tactical function, and one is the strategic function. And the tactical function is going to basically mean you're providing the necessary IT services to the company that are reliable, that are secure, and that are the most cost efficient that they can be. On the strategic side, we're using new development resources in the IT budget to create strategic value. And by strategic here we mean big, a lot of value, not just a little bit. So much value that the CIO becomes one of the CEO's favorite people in the company because of the impact that the CIO is having on the profits of the corporation. So once this distinction is made in the CIO's mind, what the CIO is going to do is he's going to delegate the tactical to his IT directors. And then that CIO is going to focus on the strategic piece. But we can't just say, so the CIO wants to be more strategic. We've got to give that CIO a specific process, some sort of turn the crank process for how they can be strategic, how they can use the new development part of their IT budget to create strategic value. So this process needs to be a tried and true, proven process. It just can't be somebody's great idea. It needs to be a best practices process. It needs to be simple in concept and straightforward in implementation. It needs to be as close to a turn the crank process, if you will, as you can get. We're going to introduce to you today a best practices process for IT alignment. It's got 5 steps to it. But first, we need a definition. IT alignment. How shall we define IT alignment? So let me ask a question. What do you say to the CIO who says, yes, I'm practicing IT alignment because all the projects in my portfolio are addressing real business needs. The business units identified these needs and I'm using our IT resources to satisfy those needs. Therefore, I have successfully aligned IT with the business. All right, so let's think for a moment. Is that IT alignment? What if we define IT alignment to be the optimum or near optimum use of IT resources to create strategic business value? In other words, we're going to use our IT resources in the best practical way possible to create the most new profits for the company. That's the focus, and that's the test. So the operative words in that definition are optimum, strategic, and value. So we see that when we talk about a process for using IT resources for strategically creating business value, We're talking about a best practices IT alignment process. So why is it not IT alignment when a CIO says, I'm aligned because all the projects in my portfolio respond to legitimate business needs that were requested by the business units? Why is that not IT alignment? Well, let me ask the question. How does that CIO know that those business needs identified by the business units were the best possible use of his IT budget to create new profits for the company? Is that really the question and the focus of those business units when they brought to IT those particular business requests? Usually not. Usually those requests are tactical in nature. In other words, the business unit says, here's some particular problem that faces us in the way that we are trying to do whatever it is we do. And we see an opportunity for IT to improve the efficiency of how we do this. And so IT, could you please build me a system that does that? Now, just because a business unit becomes more efficient in how it does something doesn't really speak to whether or not what it's doing is the best thing it should be doing. A lot of times the business unit is not focused on what's the best strategic thing to do for the company because they lack the perspective to be able to do that even if they wanted to. They're focused on their tactical needs. So when you're getting requests from the business units as the CIO to build an IT system that does this, that, or the other thing, most of the time you're going to end up building tactical solutions, sometimes not even good ones. Not that the IT part isn't good, but that the particular business need that the business unit has identified isn't really what that business unit should be focused on doing. The question is, how does the CIO ensure that he or she is aimed at creating strategic value for the company? Well, we have this best practices 5-step IT alignment process, and I'll introduce it briefly and then I'll go back and explain each of the steps in more detail. So step 1, and this is a chronological process, step 1 is get a list of the strategic goals for the company. You have to have a target. So if IT is supposed to use its resources to maximize strategic impact, it would be nice to know what are the strategic goals of the company. So when we talk about what this goal list should look like, the list must be short, preferably 1 to 3 items. Sometimes I've seen this go as high as 5, but if it gets much more than 5, then the leadership team begins to lose focus. They can't focus on more than 5 things. And so you're going to lose synergy, you're going to get less impact because you're trying to do too many things. You're trying to spread yourself too thin in the company. That's not normally in the company's best interest to have too many strategic business goals. The goals must be measurable and they must have specific time frames. So for example, of an incomplete strategic goal, a company that says we want to increase the profitability of the company, that may be a strategic focus, but it's not actually a well-defined goal, because what does that mean? Does that mean increase the profitability by 0.5%? Or does it mean increase the profitability by 5 or 10%? Example of a better strategic goal would be increase profits by 15% in the next 12 months. So that we're saying what needs to be happen, we're saying how much of it needs to be happening in order for us to consider this successful, and how long we've got to pull that off. So what the time frame is associated with that. So an example here of what we would consider to be a good strategic goal list for a company would be, number 1, increase annual profits by 12% by a particular date. Number 2, increase our market share from 14 to 15% by a particular date, and increase our brand awareness in our target consumer group nationwide from 7%, which is what it is currently, to 10% by a particular date. Now these dates are all in the past here, but this would be an example of a strategic goal list from a company that we would look at and we go, yep, that's an effective goal list. The second step in the 5-step IT alignment process is once that strategic goal list has been published, get all of the different CXOs and business unit leaders of the company to talk about what they're planning on doing to help accomplish that strategic goal list. So, for example, if your strategic goal said we want to increase the market share of the company by a certain number of points in a given period of time, then you might expect that the CMO would consider an initiative something like what we have written here: launch a new $15 million national advertising campaign designed to increase our brand awareness among target market consumers. Now, the important thing to remember here is synergy. Nobody is as smart as a group. So Lone Rangers, although they might feel like they're being heroes, they're actually being anchors on the organization. They're dragging the organization down. Perhaps you've seen a basketball coach take his absolute best player who's got a great shooting record, can hit shots from 40, 50 feet away from the basket consistently, and rejects him from the team. I mean, it doesn't happen very often, but you have seen that, and you might go, why would that be? Why would he take his best player and throw him off the team? Well, if the guy can't be a team player, a wise coach understands his team is not going to be able to accomplish as much because they're being dragged down by a superhero. Instead, they'll be able to accomplish more if they can function as a team. The same is true in the corporate leadership realm. So, step 3, we want to brainstorm to find hidden opportunities that will allow IT to build solutions that are going to either directly help accomplish the strategic goals or indirectly help accomplish the strategic goals by causing these CXO initiatives that we identified in step 2 to be done better. So what we do is we have something called an IT alignment brainstorming group, or we call those ITAB groups for short. They are a collection of both IT staffers and business people. Maybe about 7 people in an ITAB group would be optimum. And what they're doing is they are going to pursue a multifaceted process for identifying potential IT systems that will help step 1 or step 2 happen better in the IT alignment process. So an ITAB group initially might consist of the CIO, an IT project manager, a couple of business unit senior people. Obviously, you're not going to get CXO level people to sit on the ITAB group, but direct reports to CXOs would be great if you can get them. We oftentimes advocate the youngest, geekiest guy in IT. The reason you want that person on the ITAB group is they are, although they won't probably come up with mature suggestions that are implementable as proposed, that person is going to have a better view of what the latest breaking new technologies are out there. And they will be able to bring to the table technologies that otherwise would be invisible to the more mature staff that's focused on doing their job, and they don't have an extra 20 hours a week to be reading PC Magazine and Computer World and whatever else it is that this guy is reading to get his latest and greatest new technology ideas. Now, when we talk about hidden opportunity, we mean that the ITAB group is not allowed, this is very, very important, the ITAB group is not allowed to suggest any IT initiative that currently is under development or under proposal, already being proposed by the IT department. That's why we say hidden. In other words, the ITAB group is only allowed to suggest ideas that nobody's thinking about yet inside the company. If you don't put that constraint on the ITAB group, every time you will only get the ITAB group coming back to say, yep, what we're already working on is what we ought to be working on. Let's just keep going. That's the most comfortable solution for everybody involved, but it's not the most useful or productive solution. So they're looking for things that nobody's thought about yet. Step 4 of the IT alignment process is to prioritize and select the best ideas that come out of step 3. So in step 3, the ITAB group is going to be saying, well, here's an idea, and here's an idea, and here's an idea, and here's an idea. And we're going to rank order those based on internal rate of return or projected internal rate of return. Now, to do that properly, I hope that you've seen the lecture on how we do ROI justification for IT projects. It's important that you do the proper assessment of the intangible benefits for strategic IT systems. Most of the benefits of the really good ideas are going to be intangible. Those are the benefits that are most difficult to properly assess, but without doing so, you're going to come up with faulty IRRs, and you're going to end up picking tactical projects instead of strategic projects. So based on IRRs that have properly considered the intangible benefits, we're going to prioritize the ideas coming out of step 3, and then typically select the highest IRR solutions. Although that there may be some political components to that or some other practical constraints that will cause us to maybe not pick choices 1, 2, and 3 off that list, but maybe 1, 4, and 5 off that list and jump over 2 and 3 because they take too long to build or they cost too much to build or whatever. And then step 5 in the IT alignment process is to plan for and institute and execute a serious post-project audit policy. There's a law of nature that we like to appeal to. If you measure it, the likelihood of success goes way up. And you'll also, having those metrics now, be able to present that to others in a credible form so that they'll recognize that that success actually happened. And seeking accountability is the mark of a truly effective executive. Increased accountability causes us all to feel like we're being placed in a box, and that's uncomfortable. However, increased accountability causes us all to produce more, and a truly effective executive gets that. And so they're actually seeking increased accountability because they know that it will cause them to produce more. So quickly, let's review these 5 steps before we move on. Step 1 of the IT alignment process is get a list of the strategic goals of the company. Step 2 is get the other CXOs to tell you what their new business initiatives are going to be to help accomplish those strategic goals. Step 3 is to convene an ITAB group or ITAB groups that are directed at finding creative new ideas. Ideas haven't yet been thought about in this company. Creative new ideas for how we can do a better job to accomplish the strategic goals from step 1 or to help accomplish and make more effective the CXO initiatives identified in step 2. And then taking a look at all those great new ideas, have some sort of prioritization process that bubbles to the top, those ideas that have the highest internal rate of return. And then in step 4, we're going to prioritize those and resource those. Oftentimes that will mean redeployment of IT resources. In other words, we're going to pull resources away from something we have been building that has a lower IRR and place them instead on these new ideas that are strategic value add ideas. And then step 5 is plan for and institute and execute a serious post-project audit policy that's going to go back and measure the business benefit after deployment, measure the real business benefit, and report that back, which we'll talk later about why that increases the accountability and the likelihood of success for your IT projects. So this is a fairly simple 5-step process, and it begs the question, what's the catch? Well, why do we ask the question, what's the catch? Well, it seems too simple. Where are the gotchas in this 5-step process? There are some gotchas. So in other words, why isn't everyone doing this simple 5-step IT alignment process? Well, the best CIOs are, but a lot aren't. So one of the reasons everybody's not doing it is some people don't know about it. Another reason everybody's not doing it is some people, when they first take a look at what's involved in IT alignment, they want to back away from it. They go, this is going to be too hard. And after all, I mean, I'm already the CIO, I've got a job, it's apparently secure, why should I go around and rock the boat? Isn't this going to undermine my security? Isn't it going to make me take risks that potentially could get me fired? That's actually a false impression, but some more timid CIOs come to that conclusion. Normally the writing is on the wall for them. They just haven't read it yet. As we get into the IT alignment process, we're going to take a look at the pain involved in step 4 of the IT alignment process. It turns out step 4 can be painful, and this is going to require the CIO to exhibit leadership, courage, perseverance, and political skill. When we think deeper about it, we're going to see in some companies step 1 is going to be painful. And this is going to require the CIO to exhibit leadership, courage, perseverance, and political skill. And as we sit and think about each of the other steps of IT alignment, the deeper we get into it, the more we realize each of these is going to be challenging. And so the more we understand the challenge that faces us of IT alignment, the more we recognize this is not just a little hill that we have to climb, but this may be a major mountain that we have to climb. Again, some timid CIOs may start backing away from this idea when